David, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
No, thank you, Nancy. I'm a big fan of the show, so it's great to be here.
Good, excellent. That's what we like to hear. Can you outline for us, for anyone who doesn't know, what Punch is about?
So, Punch is about a young man called Jacob Dunn, who grew up in an area of South Nottingham, in a quite a deprived area called the Meadows. It outlines his early life, growing up with a single mother, a series of neurodivergent issues, which led to difficulty at school, and a period in his early life where he was a part of a gang, which all led towards this incident which occurred in 2011 when he threw a single punch which took the life of a young man called James Hodgkinson. And it's the story of the result of that incident, where his life went, and the relationship which he built with the parents of the boy that he killed.
Did you know the story before you sort of read the script?
I didn't. I didn't. I mean, it's funny. You give this description to people, and everyone says, "Oh, I know that story. I heard that. I heard that at the time." And I think sadly that's just because one punch killings happen far more often than people realize. So I've told myself that I've heard of it, and I think I have a vague memory of the mugshot of Jacob on the BBC News, but I don't know for certain that I did. But certainly, obviously, when the script came through, I read as much about it as I could, and and then finally when I joined the production, Jacob himself, because he was a part of the production, was able to fill in all the details that I needed to know.
What was your first reaction when you read it?
Well, when I first read it, when I first got the audition, only a half of the play had been written.
Oh, yes,
Um,
classic James Graham.
yeah. So I went in. Maybe I think actually I'd only in the first page. I don't think even the first half had been written, and so it wasn't until I joined the production that I read the whole piece. So I didn't really know where it was going, but it's when we got together and read it through as a cast for the first time, I realized the how powerful this story could be, the potential of this production. The three individuals at the heart of it, the kind of insane sort of alchemy of these three people coming together has led to an amazing result, and the attempts of these three people to try and salvage what they could out of the worst possible thing happening. Yeah, I found it deeply moving from the off, and I think my experience of performing it is that other people have found it similarly moving.
Yes, I don't think I've had quite such a strong emotional response to a play for a very long time, actually, and everyone in the audience was in pieces when I saw it. Jacob, you said that Jacob was there from the start, so he was a big part of rehearsals and your process, wasn't he? So tell us about that and how that relationship developed.
He was there from the first day of rehearsals, which was so useful because we went out for drinks on the first night after the first day of rehearsals, and I got to ask him all the questions that I need to know about his different motivations at different points. Why did he choose to engage in the restorative justice process? Why did he, what compelled him to go on and try and make something of himself and apply to university and do all these kind of things, as well as kind of study his mannerisms and try and understand him better. That was super useful for me. Joan and Tony and Julie didn't have the same, weren't given the same opportunity because Joan and David weren't in the rehearsal process in the same way. But they
Joan
they
and David are James's parents, yeah.
that's right, yeah. But they did, they came into rehearsals at one point, and so they were able to ask those questions. And they also those two, which is one of the hardest experiences, they came into the a rehearsal space towards the end of the rehearsal process before Nottingham, and we performed the show to them, which is one of the
Mhm.
hardest things I've ever had to do, because you're in a brightly lit rehearsal space. They're 5 meters away from you. You're recreating some of the hardest, most awful experiences in their life, you know, the punch which killed their son, them turning off the life support machine, and they're in bits, they're 5 meters away from you, Jacob's there, he's in bits, and then that sent us into a kind of a slightly crazed space and performance. And it was, you know, I'd be lying if I didn't say that it felt almost wrong at times, almost kind of grotesque. It's kind of like, what are we doing right now? Performing these things to them. But I'm so glad that we did, because there were elements to which they wanted changed. I mean, that's what's so good about James as a writer, is that, you know, he's able to, as we all know, condense these big political, social themes into a play which is dramatic and still manages to still be funny and entertaining, but he also has a deep consideration and care for his subjects, and you know, because they weren't happy with certain elements. Like, I'll give you an example: that certain characters in the play, they refer to the incident as an accident, and David, James's father, in that rehearsal space that day, was said, you know, it's not an accident. No one punches anyone accidentally. And then that line ends up in the final show. So James has this kind of sort of feedback loop with the way he handles his subjects, which was amazing to watch, and I think has led to a more authentic and truthful result.
It's interesting, isn't it, what David says about no one punching anyone by accident, and yet the killing in a sense is there are just so many layers of moral complexity about this story, aren't there? Kind of, you know, he did something terrible. He didn't mean to do the thing that finally came of his terrible action, but you don't, as you say, you don't do that by accident. It feels like, you know, there's sort of you don't do that benignly, and he didn't do it in self-defense, and
Hmm.
yet you come out of this play with a great deal of sympathy for both him and for James and for his parents, and it kind of, how do you sort of how do you kind of work all that out in your head, or how did that sort of play out as you were getting into this role?
It's difficult, isn't it? I mean, our director, Adam Penford, you know, he would use the word that this play is very knotty, and there's a
Yeah.
kind of a knottiness to it. I don't think there are simple answers to those questions that you're raising. You know, I think audiences at the end shouldn't be left with a clearly defined ethical kind of summary of what they've just watched, and I'm not sure I have one either. Really, it's yeah, because of course Jacob didn't mean to kill James, but at the same time, he didn't throw that punch accidentally. Um, you know, you could get in if you really wanted to into the whole, and I think James sort of alludes to this with Jacob's upbringing and the failures in education. You could get into the whole sort of free will or lack of free will kind of argument, and how that applies to the criminal justice system, if you want, which is just another level of naughtiness to apply to it all. I think what we just want is for audiences to come out and ask themselves those questions, really,
Mm.
and to have hopefully empathy for the individuals, and maybe even, you know, dare I say it, question themselves how they might act in perhaps not situations as kind of grave as the, you know, the events that we portray, but how they react to things that happen to them, and how they might make amends for what they've done or whatever. You know, I don't want to, you know, we're not trying to be kind of, I don't know, priestly about it, but yeah, yeah, we want our audience to ask themselves like questions at the end. And the great thing is about this production is that, you know, they're going to be allowed to do that. We have a series of post-show talks which are happening in this show. I think what's really nice for us as a cast, as a production, is the feeling that, you know, we've gone on this progression from Nottingham and down to the Young Vic, and now into the West End, and we feel that we're not, the production isn't losing of something of itself even as we go on into the West End. You know, we have a whole series of productions which are for special interested groups and for schools with max price of £10 tickets, and then we have these after show, post show talks, 9 of them, with people from Remedy, the Restorative Justice Charity, with Jacob, the character I play, and with Michael Palin and Alistair Campbell and a whole host of other speakers. And then also Kate Pakenham and Philida Lloyd, our producers, have committed their royalties and producer profits to ensuring that the production, that the play has a life beyond our West End show around the UK. So it's nice to know that the show isn't losing without wanting to sound too self-important as actors I want to do, isn't losing its kind of integrity even as it moves on to Shaftesbury Avenue.